Hello, TradingView community. Welcome to my new analysis about Apple on several time frame perspectives. And in this analysis, I am also looking at the recent developments with Apple because with Apple there happened some very important developments that I am examining within my chart action. And with Apple, we have seen this huge bearish downside action from where Apple heavily pull it back to the downside and show it up with these huge bearish developments to the downside, with this huge bearish price action moving into the remaining supports at 175 together with the EMA, with the 200 EMA. And these are actually some very important developments here which Apple showed up with, liquidating a lot of initial long positions here within the small range. And now Apple is in a very crucial dynamic because the major breakdowns to the downside, the bearish breakdowns that I mentioned within my previous analysis, these are now somewhat not initiated because Apple managed to hold these supports. And as I mentioned, if Apple had the ability to hold these major supports, this was a major development for Apple because Apple had the ability to hold these supports. If Apple would form several lows here within this wall structure and continue to the downside, this would have triggered many long positions down the line here. And this is what not happened now. The second scenario happened now. The second scenario happened and Apple did not broke down below these supports and actually now had the ability to bounce within these important zones here. Now, this does not mean Apple is completely bullish on the extreme long-term perspective, that Apple is bullish forever now. However, it firstly signals that Apple had the ability to show up with an important reversal which shifted the wall dynamics for Apple within this wall structure. And this can be seen here clearly. Apple had these many peaks here within this wall structure, and these peaks are now the major developments which Apple had the ability to bounce within this wall structure. And now looking at the 4-hour time frame perspective, which is also a major important time frame perspective for Apple here. Apple also move it on to form a very important formational structure here, which is actually a head and shoulder formation, a inverse head and shoulder formation. And the bulls actually managed to form this breakout above these main remaining local resistance zones here. And this was actually a major breakout development that Apple showed up with here. And now Apple is actually in a very crucial state right now because from here on it actually has some further development potentials to reach out to the local structures. And actually, as Apple completed this main inverse head and shoulders formation, this actually activated target zones within this wall structure. And as it can be seen here within my chart, Apple has now activated target zones between the 190 and between the 139, between the 194 area and the 196 area. And these are some very important target zones that Apple has now activated. And as Apple has shown up with this major bounce within the structure, completing this whole inverse head and shoulders formation, the next times will be very decisive for Apple because there's a high likelihood possibility that once Apple reaches out all these target zones, the whole dynamic will be shifted into a more important development, especially on the middle term perspective, because once Apple reaches out all these determined target zones that have been determined by this major inverse head and shoulders formation, these target zones will be very, very important for Apple, because from there on, if actually Apple has the ability to stay within this area and to stay and build up within this whole area, this could be the part of a much larger formational structure that can transform the whole market interface into a much more volatile dynamic factor approach here, because in this case Apple will have actually the potential to stay within this whole dynamic and form a huge ascending triangle formation. And as I mentioned already in previous analysis ideas, such a ascending triangle formation actually has the potential to move into a huge volatility breakout once it has been completed. And this is actually a huge ascending triangle formation that Apple actually forms here within this whole structure. And once it has been completed, it is likely to convert the whole market interface into a major volatile dynamic here. And when looking at this whole chart on the daily time frame perspectives also, in this case, once Apple has moved on to complete this gigantic ascending triangle formation, which will be activated when Apple shows up with the necessary momentum, staying here within this whole area and bouncing within this area, then the major volatility developments will show up for Apple once the major breakouts have been settled. And in this case, Apple will actually move on to show up with further determinations in this whole structure and activate further determinations. And in this case, the targets above 220 will be active. It will be a target zone between 220 and 225. This will be the major target zone for Apple to expect once this whole formational structure has been completed, and once Apple showed up with this major development, completing this whole formational structure in this whole case. And in this case, it will be a very important development for Apple to show up with here in this whole structure. And especially in this case, a major formational structure is forming here actually. And there's a high potential for Apple to reach out to these final target zones between the 220 and 225 area. Now, if not a major supply shock enters the market, with a major supply moving into the market and the consumer expenditures which have risen recently within the US are turning to the downside with a huge supply shock coming in, this scenario is the most realistic scenario to consider for the next times. And in this case, with the breakout dynamics, a major setup is setting up here, and this can be used at a potential entry and at with a smart long entry into these directions to move on with this whole wave developments. Therefore, this is currently the most likely scenario. Of course, we are also looking at the macro data within the market and combine them with the data dashboard and the Apple price action, and combine them with the fundamentals, with the underlying fundamentals of Apple. However, from this chart perspective, this dynamic should be considered within the next times, especially when Apple holds on with the major momentum it has set up recently. And especially as Apple already completed this huge reversal formation. This is a very important dynamic. Of course, we should also look at the recessions, tensions, as well as inflation. If inflation should bounce extraordinarily, which should decrease the demand, consumer expenditures, this could also be a turning for Apple. However, currently this is the most likely scenario. Therefore, we will watch out for this dynamic, and it will be a very interesting dynamic. Therefore, you are welcomed to like, follow, and comment my idea and my project. With this being said, have a good day. Bye bye.